So here's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to get started with the idea of systematic screening, but we want to situate that within your tiered system, because the good news about what's happened is that for the first time nationally, we are in a position where screening is a priority for just about everybody. 100% of the people have responded to the situation to know that our kids are coming back to what George Sugai talks about potentially being a better new normal. Because in school systems now, we've all got this priority placed on making sure that we are prepared to meet kids' social and emotional well-being needs in the same way that we are going to support their positive behavior and their academic considerations. So as we're talking about guidance for screening in this year ahead, I want you to know that we're going to first start about the system that you've built and setting up for success so that when you do start screening, and we're going to give you some practical, concrete things to do, we want to make sure you have a clear path forward for using those data that you collect in the fall. But the shorter answer is, should you screen in the fall? Absolutely, without question. But we want to do it cautiously, because one of the things we're all clear on is nobody has done any psychometric studies on how screening tools function in this context. It's brand new for all of us. So we're going to talk today about, yes, move forward, but proceed with caution. We're going to encourage you to partner with people to see how your screening tools function. And Wendy and I will be extending opportunities to districts. We already have plans for partnering with people to move that forward. So we'll let you know what those are. And then we do want to talk about using multiple sources of data. So that's like the advanced organizer of what we're going to get to. But first, we're going to start with just a moment to breathe. And I truly want to thank you, because historically, these have always been the kids that Wendy and I have been interested in, looking for kids with emotional and behavioral challenges. These are the kids that are near and dear to our heart as former special educators. And we have created a lifetime of work about actually looking for kids at the first sign of concern and jumping into support. And when we think about all of the kids in schools, even before this COVID situation, so when before this even started, if you were to take a picture of all of public schools across the United States of America, you would actually find that in that snapshot, approximately 12% of all school-age kids, kindergarten to 12th grade, have some type of internalizing issues like shy, anxious, or withdrawn, or acting out behaviors like non-compliant aggression. And some kids, if you see that overlap, have both. And in that same snapshot, it's actually 20% of school-age kids that have mild to severe challenges. So this has already been an issue. And when some people think that, okay, that's not my problem as a general educator, they're going to get referred, they're going to go to special ed, and they're going to get help in another way. That's simply not the case. Less than 1% of all school-age kids with significant behavior challenges go on to receive special education under that category of emotional disturbances. And so my sincere thanks to Kim and to Patty and the APBS networks, because this commitment to tiered systems is exactly what we need. And when we think about the tiered systems that you've built, we are making priorities on integrated systems to meet kids' multiple needs. I don't think there is going to be one human being that starts this fall that's going to be untouched by what's happening right now in this COVID era. Many of us have people that we have loved, that we have lost. We've got families that we're worried about. We're concerned about our kids. We've got aging parents. Employment's at 41 million people unemployed. I think the point prevalence estimates are going to increase. And so we need to be prepared to bring kids back in a way that levels the playing field for kids, where we are specifically addressing their social and emotional well-being, providing positive behavior intervention supports, and attending to their academics. And that's a tall issue, because teachers are in the same situation. They're dealing with the same stressors as well. Because if we don't have a tier 1 plan, there is no point in screening, because you first need to know, is tier 1 happening as you planned it, like with fidelity? And now I need to be ready to screen in this new environment so that I can connect kids to tier 2 supports, so that I can connect kids to tier 3 supports. And it might be like when you get your screening data, oftentimes like in traditional environments, people would say, oh my gosh, Kathleen, you're not going to believe this. We've got 42% of our kids screening in the yellow. What do I do? You know, it's like, I just want everybody to remember they were there yesterday. So take a breath and know that we're going to move forward. And if you got that many kids showing up as having tier 3 or tier 2 or tier 3 needs, that is a tier 1 issue. We got work to do. And so right now, like looking ahead for next year, when you screen in the fall, we want to make sure that we've got a clear plan for thinking about what to do. And if it were me, I'm expecting higher rates of internalizing issues coming back. So when I think about this, the lessons that I'm going to teach at tier 1, I would do a ton right now with internalizing issues. So now, let's say you've got this in place, you've got your system, and you're thinking about different ways you can teach it and reinforce it, acknowledge kids' behavior. Now we want to think about how to connect kids using the screening data that you're going to collect in the fall and moving them through the tiers. Whatever screening tool you pick, you want to stay with that same screening tool for next year. And that is people's first question, is should we be continuing to screen? And we would say yes. So our first recommendation is continue to screen, but screen with caution, because right now, whether you're using the student risk screening scale for internalizing or externalizing, or you're using the SABRS, or you're using the BAS-3 best, you want to continue to use it with fidelity, but realize there's been no psychometric studies about how those work in a virtual environment. But you want to move forward with that, but you want to engage in really good partnership with people who can help you look at the accuracy of those data as they come together. So if you are a school that's using like the SRSS-IE, these same cut scores, you should not change. People also have been asking us, should we add other items to the screening tools? And the answer is no. They are validated. That's right, Denise. Thank you for shaking your head. No, don't do it. We want to make sure that you're using the tool with procedural integrity so that when you get this information back, you can continue to connect these data to past years. I don't recommend shifting screening tools right now either, because they're just like Ames Web and Dibbles are not interchangeable. The same is true for behavior screenings. These are data from a real elementary school that we work with. They started CI3T in 2014. These are their fall data over time. And they are, as you can see, and you should not draw any causal conclusions because this is just descriptive information, but you see the percentage of kids in the low risk category and getting bigger over time. Same school, internalizing issues. Look at this. When they started, they had about 56% of their kids in the low risk range for internalizing. That was their biggest issue. This school right now, what they're doing is they're looking at their screening data, their last screening time point, and they didn't screen in spring because the world fell apart for them. So they're using their winter to anticipate what's coming back. They're using those data to connect with families, to check on kids, to make sure they're okay. We've got one district where there was a problem with some of the fidelity of the winter time point. Like some teachers just didn't get to it, which was unusual for that district. And now they're like, dang, like I need that information now to know how to support kids. So when we think about being able to unpackage it, like go back. If you've been screening, go back right now. Take your last time point, unpackage it, look at grade levels. Because remember, those kindergartners from last year are going to be first graders. Those first graders are going to be second graders. If you're in middle school, if you've been in a middle school or high school setting, remember, it's not every teacher screening every single period. We are looking at progress over time. And now I've got this transparency. If you've already been screening, use that to see who do you anticipate to be at heightened risk? Connect with those families right now. And remember that all those things we've learned before, like we've learned in the past, like the SRSS-IE, I focus on that because that's a big part of our research because we want to have a free access screening tool. We've learned things that like kids who started off the year in the green had on average 1.5 office discipline referrals earned at the end. Kids that started off the year in the yellow category, moderate, they earned on average 5. Kids that started off the year at high risk, they earned on average 8. We know that those fall scores predict how kids do behaviorally. We know that predicts how they do academically. At the high school level and the middle school level, we know that kids that start off the year at heightened risk are more likely to end the year with lower grade point averages and fail more classes. And it takes literally 15 minutes to screen your entire school. So yes, we should keep screening, but now we need new quick studies, quick turnaround to say, does it still work? So like at Larry's school, when they screen in fall, they're going to want to look to see how does it progress in the COVID era? Does it predict how kids do? And we want to be able to support schools who have been doing this on their own. These are data from a high school principal who sent these to us saying, look what's happening in our building over time. And he's seeing shifts in internalizing. He is seeing shifts in externalizing. And I have to tell you, as a mother of 2 kids, a 24 and a 20-year-old, the group of kids I'm most worried about constantly are the kids with internalizing issues. The kids with externalizing issues, we know who they are. They suit up, they show up, they're never absent. And the kids with internalizing are the ones I worry about because their behaviors do not interrupt instruction. So they're not as likely to get noticed. So when you're thinking about your system, pay attention to all the same guidelines as before. Do screen, keep it secure, share it appropriately. Item level data should not be used. So it's not like Wendy scored a 3 on stealing, so she needs a stealing interventions. Screening tools work because you're looking to see, do these behaviors occur together into a high enough degree? Because if they do, that is the cause for concern. And then when you're thinking about screening resources and coaching protocols and getting started for next year, stay tuned. On our website, by the end of the month, you will see updated coaching protocols to guide people through that process. And on that website, you can go through and check out a whole range of different screening tools. But once you've selected it and you've installed it, then what we're going to do next year is we're going to look at it. These are data from a school in North Carolina. The first time they screened, that's the percentage of kids in the low, moderate, and high risk category for reading, math, pro-social behavior, and motivation to learn. We know when data come back like this, that's a tier 1 issue. You're not going to try to put all those kids into extra supports. I am going to start by empowering tier 1. That's different than this middle school where you've got an opportunity for to really focus on meeting kids' needs who have tier 2 and tier 3 needs. The other thing I want to say is you're going to be able to use your data in this coming year together with other sources of data. Pull down kids' reading, pull down kids' math, pull down their externalizing and internalizing. And remember, this year, attendance is going to be particularly, just like normal. Like, we want to make sure, like, if kids are not there, school is a must be present to win game. So our first goal is going to be able to get kids there. And then as a teacher, like, if you look at your screening data and realize I've got more than 20% of my kids that are feeling challenged, then we need to put these tools in the hand of every teacher. We need to have on-demand, free access, professional learning resources to teach teachers how to do these strategies in virtual environments to keep our kids engaged online or engaged in the building, realizing there's a lot of competing anxieties and things that are happening for them. Now, I do want to show you that on our website, if you go under professional learning, you will find these little blue bars. And if this is all, you're welcome to it. Like, if you want to do active supervision or instructional choice or high probability requests, you can download stuff. There's presentations, there's fidelity checklists, go use it. You could do a strategy a month in your buildings if you wanted to. So when you click on those, you'll find a PowerPoint presentation, something you can email to a teacher. So it's built for you. You don't have time to make this stuff. So go ahead and use that because you want to make sure that teachers are feeling set up for success. And then even with all that in place, solid integrated tier 1, clarity on tier 2 is still going to need to be there. So you're going to have to start to think about, how will I do check-in and check-out in a tier 2 environment? And I want you to think about tier 2 in terms of intensity. My daughter is 20. She's wonderful. Love everything about her. She is a competitive CrossFitter. And, 5 years ago, I really wanted to spend time with her before she left for college. And I'm like, hey, why don't we go to yoga together to spend time together? And she's like, no offense, Mom, but yoga's for old ladies. And I'm like, okay, shots fired, whatever. So I'm like, how about we go to Zumba? So we went to Zumba together and I thought it was fairly stunning. And she's like, that can never, ever happen again. She's like, if you want to hang out with me, you can go to the box. You can go to the gym with me. So I go in and in my very first class, like Katie's over there doing handstand push-ups. And this guy says to me, hey, Kathleen, come on over here, lay on this box. So I lay on this box and he puts this ab mat pillow there. And I'm like, what's that for? And he's like, well, I'm going to have you go like this to pretend to do push-ups on this bot. And that ab mat is in case you lose control. I don't want you to hit your head. And then she's on the rig and she's doing chest to bars. And then he's like, come here, Kathleen. And he puts this giant rubber band on that rig. And then I step my foot into there and there's still no movement. So he's like, you need 2 rubber bands. So I got tier 3 on that, but that's okay. Point being is when we think about what tier 2 and tier 3 is going to look like next year, it's not going to be all small group and that kind of thing. Likely there might be some, but we want to think about tier 2 as low intensity supports like self-monitoring, having kids engage in evidence-based practices to stay engaged, suit up, show up, attempt to do the next right thing. And your screening data are going to need to be used to make that happen. And when we put kids in tier 2 and tier 3 supports, just like always, we need to know, is it happening? How do kids feel about it? And is it working? And that social validity piece is asking kids, are you comfortable with this support? We need to ask them, because if they tell you up front that, you know, I would be embarrassed to have that self-monitoring thing happening, then we need to do that in a private way or pick a different intervention and know that we don't just leave them in these tier 2 forever. As we need to make sure that we're connecting to the support that they need and exiting them when they don't need it anymore. And if they need something like a tier 3 support, like a functional assessment-based intervention or a de-escalation plan, we will absolutely do that. But let's make sure that that is what they need. And some kids are going to need that right away. Now, we are going to wrap up by talking explicitly about what you do. We've talked about building a system. We've talked about moving forward with screening, but making sure you're partnering with somebody to see how it works. We've talked about using multiple sources of data. Even 10 years ago, we would have said these recommendations to you. Wendy and I have written volumes about getting started with screening. And we want to make sure that before you screen, you build people's expertise, because you're right. If you're not screening right now and you're leaning in that direction, you don't want to just like come back and say, hey, fill out the screener. You want them to understand how the screening data will be used. It is not used to exclude a child. So just like Taylor and Denise are nodding their heads right now, thank you. That's right. We need to build a plan and then help people to understand, because in the beginning, teachers are worried about that. Like, who am I to say that? Teachers are awesome to us. Like, they see kids stressed, stretched. They see kids in social situations. We know that teachers are highly accurate. Sometimes people have said to Wendy and I, like, well, I'm worried this is too subjective. Is this really work? Yeah, we know it really works because those data actually predict important outcomes for kids. But you have to have the structures in place, and we have to be responsible in our screening. So right now, in this COVID era, thinking in your tiered system, and again, the recommendation is not to switch systems, that it's to solidify, shift, pivot, use the system that you've built. So we encourage you to continue with screening if you're doing it, and to select something that you feel comfortable implementing and sustaining if you're not yet doing it, and then engage in really high quality professional learnings so that teachers know how to use the data and how to collect it accurately, and paying attention to things like you should never email screening data. Like I mentioned, you should not use item level data to inform interventions. And we know that because we've tried it. The field's tried it and we realized it was wrong. So we want to think about that. We want to also think about using multiple sources of data to inform instruction. Remember, screening is just a screener. It's like when you go to the blood, like go get your blood pressure checked at a doctor's office. It might be high because there is an issue. It could be that it's high because you're anxious about being at the doctor's office. So it is but one indicator. And then when we talk about screening responsibly, and please listen to this part carefully. If you are exploring the possibility of also adding on now parent completed screeners or student completed screeners, you must be prepared to respond to what they share. Everything we've been talking about today is a teacher completed screener. Remember, teachers are mandated reporters. So if they were aware that that child was a danger to themselves and others, or that they were being hurt, that would have been reported. So in reality, there's really no new information coming in a screener. It's just how that information is aggregated, put together. That's what's used to shape instruction. If you invite parent screenings now or student completed screenings, those are wonderful tools. Like if you look at the BAS 3 Best, there's a whole suite of tools that you can use to get the parent, the teacher, the student perspective. The same is true for the strength and difficulties questionnaire, but now you are bringing in new information. So if a child tells Nikki, like I circle this item that indicates I'm at heightened risk for or if I'm thinking about hurting myself, or if somebody is hurting me, you must respond to that. You cannot screen and then shelf that information. And remember, families are in really vulnerable situations right now. So be cautious. I'm not saying don't do it. I am saying be cautious about how you do that. And as we think right now about action planning for moving forward with systematic screening for next year, I'd invite you to think carefully about what are the resources that are out there. And I do believe that some people are feeling super bombarded by all the well-intending things that are out there. I'm going to encourage everybody to just take a breath, take your existing system, and let's think about how you can pivot it to be prepared to respond to instruction. So like on ci3t.org, you'll find an infographic that explains all the family resources that are there. I love that Kim also is highlighting some of the very fine products from the National Center. And she showed you that topic for next time that you're going to have about responding to schools in a crisis. Know that there's 3 other briefs that you're going to want to read, including how to create a PBS behavior expectation for teaching in remote instruction. We're going to want to think about what are the specific tools that teachers are going to need to move forward for next year. And please remember, we're not working in a data-free environment. Educators are the best researchers, in my opinion. We use data every single day to make decisions about what to teach, how to teach. Is it working? Is it happening? And so remember that plan out your assessment schedule for next week. When I hop off this call, Wendy and I have a district meeting and we're actually mapping out the 3 times a year they're going to do screenings. And that's what I want to leave you with. When you do your screenings for next year, there still will be 3 times a year. You wait 4 to 6 weeks after the year begins to do your first behavior screening. You do it again before winter break. It's a short period of time, but you're looking to see how kids are responding to tier 1 efforts. And then you screen again in spring. 2 important distinctions between academic screening and behavior screenings. Academic screenings require time with kids. You are not having any time with kids. So if Wendy was screening me and I'm a student in her class, she's not saying, Kathleen, are you internalizing today? Although when my kids were younger, I used to ask that. But she would be independently completing these ratings on me to look to see how I'm doing. So no time with kids. And remember, the fall time point is later in the school year because we have to let that honeymoon roll off a little bit when kids come back. So you're going to screen 3 times a year, fall, 4 to 6 weeks after school year begins. And we encourage you to push it closer to 6 this year. Secondly, screen in winter, then screen in spring. And the winter needs to happen before your winter break so you're prepared to respond. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome. And I just want to say, oh, thanks, Nikki, you're sweet. I just want to say that although this is a great time of tremendous stress and it's frightening, as I said, I'm a mother and I'm a researcher and there's a lot going on in the world, but I have to say the thing that I appreciate right now that I am absolutely inspired by is the field of education. Our entire community dropped everything to figure out a way to help to continue to educate our kids. And right now, the world is moving forward with making sure that the total child is supported. So people are, for the first time, not trying to deal with academics separately from behavior and social and emotional well-being. This is a gift in a way. And I do think that our new normal could be, as George talked about, being a better new normal. So you inspire me, go out, take care of yourself, wash your hands, feed and water yourself, exercise. And thank you to Kim and Patty, Wendy, and I greatly appreciate you being here.